December 18th, 1944, 1:43 p.m., 28,000 feet above Tokyo Bay. Staff Sergeant Henry "Red" Irwin feels the entire B-29 shudder as another Zero slams into their tail section. The intercom explodes with screaming. Blood runs down his forehead into his eyes. Through the cracked glass of his tail gunner position, he counts them. 17 Japanese fighters circling like sharks, their pilots laughing through the radio frequencies they've intercepted. They're mocking him in broken English. American tail gun. Boom, boom, no good. They've studied the B-29. They know its weakness. That tail gun everyone said was useless. That position the Japanese high command told their pilots to ignore because it couldn't possibly protect a bomber this large. Red's hands shake as he grips the controls of his twin 50 caliber machine guns. 12 minutes. That's all he has before the fighters escort them into the ocean. But what those Japanese pilots don't know, what their intelligence officers failed to tell them, is that Red Irwin isn't just any tail gunner. But before we dive deeper into those 12 minutes that would rewrite tactical aviation manuals across 3 continents, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe. This channel brings you the most incredible true stories from military history that you won't find anywhere else. Now let's get back to 28,000 feet above Tokyo Bay, where one man is about to prove every expert wrong. To understand how we got here, how one tail gunner ended up alone against 16 of Japan's best pilots, we need to go back exactly 7 months. May 1944, Boeing's factory in Wichita, Kansas. The B-29 Superfortress is America's answer to reaching the Japanese mainland, but it has a problem that's killing crews before they ever see combat. The tail gun position is a death trap. Not because it's poorly armed, those twin or 50 calibers can shred a fighter at 800 yards. Not because of the cramped space or the minus 60-degree temperatures at altitude. The problem is geometric. Simple, brutal mathematics. The B-29's tail sits so far from the center of the aircraft that gunners experience motion sickness so severe that 3 out of every 5 men assigned to the position wash out during training. The ones who don't wash out? Half of them freeze to death when the heating systems fail at altitude, which they do constantly. The other half get killed when the hydraulic systems for the guns malfunction, leaving them defenseless while fighters tear through the tail section like tissue paper. By June 1944, tail gunner has the highest mortality rate of any position in the Army Air Forces, higher than ball turret gunners in B-17s, higher than radio operators in B-24s, higher than pilots in P-51s flying escort over Berlin. The numbers are classified, but they're staggering. 73% casualties within the first 3 missions. Japanese intelligence knows this. Their agents in neutral countries have intercepted reports from American training bases. They've photographed crashed B-29s in China and analyzed the wreckage. By August 1944, Imperial Japanese Army Air Force Command issues Tactical Directive 4471. Ignore the tail position. Focus fire on waist guns and top turret. The tail gunner is ineffective due to equipment failure and crew incapacity. It's brilliant intelligence. It's perfectly logical. It's completely accurate, until it isn't. Staff Sergeant Henry Irwin volunteers for tail gunner training on June 3, 1944. He's 24 years old, born in a small town in Alabama that doesn't appear on most maps. His superiors try to talk him out of it. The commanding officer at Piot Army Airfield in Texas literally pulls him aside and says, "Son, you're a good radio man. You've got skills we need. Don't throw your life away on that damn tail gun." Red looks him in the eye and says something that gets written up in his service record. Somebody's got to do it right. What makes Red different isn't physical. He's 5'8", 160 pounds soaking wet, unremarkable in every measurable way. What makes him different is that he's spent the last 3 years of his life as an amateur machinist. Before the war, he worked at a radio repair shop in Birmingham, taking apart complicated mechanical systems and rebuilding them. While other gunners are memorizing the manual, Red is lying awake at night visualizing the hydraulic pathways, the electrical systems, the bearing assemblies. He doesn't just know how the tail gun works, he understands it at a level that even the Boeing engineers would find impressive. During training, while other gunners are vomiting into their oxygen masks from the motion sickness, Red is redesigning the seat mounting system in his head. On his 3rd training flight, he asks permission to modify his position. His instructor thinks he's insane. "You want to change the equipment? Kid, Boeing built this thing. Who are you to second-guess Boeing?" Red's answer is simple. Boeing built it for average. I'm not average. He spends 6 weeks modifying his tail position with scrap metal and parts cannibalized from damaged aircraft. He adds counterweights to reduce the motion. He reroutes the heating system to prevent the freezing that's killed so many gunners. He even redesigns the gun sight, increasing the field of view by 17 degrees. When he's done, His commanding officer inspects it and goes silent. Then he makes a phone call that gets Red's modifications classified and distributed to exactly 12 other B-29 crews, the ones assigned to the most dangerous missions over Japan. November 1944. Red ships out to Saipan with the 73rd Bombardment Wing. The island has been secured for exactly 4 months, and the airstrip is so new you can still smell the concrete curing in the Pacific heat. His crew, 9 other men on a B-29 they've named Dragon Lady, has exactly 2 weeks of training together before their first combat mission. The pilot is Captain James McCauley, 26 years old, from Oregon. The co-pilot is Lieutenant Richard Chen, 23, from San Francisco's Chinatown. The rest of the crew is a mix of kids from farms and cities, none older than 27, all volunteers, all aware that the life expectancy for B-29 crews over Japan is currently sitting at 1-3 mission. December 7th, 1944, 3 years to the day after Pearl Harbor, Dragon Lady flies its first combat mission. Target: Mitsubishi Aircraft Factory outside Nagoya. Red's tail position works exactly as designed. The heating keeps him warm. The counterweights eliminate the motion sickness. But something else happens that changes everything. At 27,000 feet, 6 Zeros attack from the rear quarter, the exact approach Japanese tactical doctrine says to avoid. Red engages at 1,200 yards, well beyond the range where most tail gunners even attempt to fire. His tracers walk across the sky like a ruler drawing straight line. The lead Zero takes 18 rounds through the engine cowling and explodes so violently that debris damages the 2 fighters behind it. The remaining 3 break off immediately. In the debriefing, the intelligence officer doesn't believe Red's report. "You're telling me you engaged at 1,200 yards? That's impossible." "The effective range?" Red interrupts him. "The effective range is what the manual says for standard equipment. I don't have standard equipment." The intelligence officer wants to dismiss it as beginner's luck. But something about the way Red describes the engagement, the precise angles, the lead calculations, the way he adjusted for the relative velocity, makes him pause. He makes a note in Red's file. Possible exceptional gunnery talent. Monitor closely. 3 more mission. Red shoots down 2 more fighters, both at ranges that the manual says are impossible. The other crews start talking. The Japanese pilots start noticing. By mission 5, Red's tail position has a reputation. Japanese radio intercepts pickup chatter. "Dragon Lady, avoid the tail. The gunner sees too far." But reputation can be a death sentence. December 18th, 1944. The mission briefing happens at 400 hours in a Quonset hut that still smells like paint and mildew. The target is the Nakajima aircraft plant near Tokyo. It's the deepest penetration into Japanese airspace attempted so far. 63 B-29's. Expected fighter opposition? Extreme. Expected losses? 30%. Captain McCauley gives his crew the option to skip it. Every man volunteers. They're all thinking the same thing. 30% means roughly 19 bombers won't come back. They're all convinced it won't be them. They're wrong. Dragon Lady lifts off from Saipan at 0647 hours. The bomber is carrying 12,000 pounds of incendiaries, full fuel, and all 10 crew members. The weight is so extreme that McCauley uses every foot of runway, and even then, the wheels barely leave the ground before they cross the cliff at the end of the strip. Red watches the ocean drop away beneath them, knowing they're so heavy that if an engine fails in the next 10 minutes, they'll never make it back to the island. All 4 engines hold. They climb to 28,000 feet and settle into formation. The flight to Tokyo takes 6 hours and 42 minutes. Red spends it in his tail position, testing the guns, checking the ammunition feeds, running through engagement scenarios in his head. He's fired 3,047 rounds in combat so far. He's got 1,600 rounds loaded for this mission. He's thinking about arc angles and deflection shooting when the first Zero appears. 1:17 p.m., still 60 miles from the target. The fighter comes up from below, a silver speck against the blue-black sky, climbing at an angle that shows experience. Red watches it through his sight, his finger resting on the trigger, waiting. The Zero pilot knows the manual. He's staying out of range, parallel to the bomber stream, just watching. Then 17 more fighters appear. They come from every direction. Above, below, both sides. They're not attacking yet. They're organizing, and they're doing something Red has never seen before. They're concentrating entirely on Dragon Lady, not on the lead bomber, not on the element leaders, just Dragon Lady. Lieutenant Chen's voice crackles over the intercom. "Tail gunner, you seeing this?" Red keys his mic. 18 fighters, all focused on us. They know who we are. Captain McCauley's voice, steady despite what this means. "They're here for you, Red. They want to prove their intelligence boys right. They want to prove that tail position is useless." "Copy that, sir." "You need help?" Red watches the fighters circle, getting into position. their pilots absolutely confident that they're about to eliminate the one anomaly in their tactical calculations. "Negative, Captain. Let's show them what useless looks like." 1:29 p.m. The first 4 fighters commit. They come from different angles simultaneously, a coordinated attack that shows extensive training. They're flying A6M50s, the latest variant, faster and more heavily armed than earlier models. Each pilot has at least 30 combat missions. They've shot down American aircraft over the Philippines, over Formosa, over the Marianas. They're not rookies, they're not afraid. Red fires before they're in their effective range. His tracers arc out across 1,400 yards of empty sky. The lead Zero pilot sees them coming and rolls hard left, exactly as his training dictates, exactly as Red predicted. The second burst catches him inverted at the top of his roll, when his momentum is carrying him in a perfectly predictable arc. 18 rounds through the cockpit. The fighter comes apart like someone threw a grenade into a model airplane. The second Zero pilot sees his leader die and hesitates for exactly 3 seconds. It's enough. Red's third burst hits the engine. The plane doesn't explode, it just stops flying. One moment it's an aircraft, the next it's a collection of parts falling separately through 28,000 feet of atmosphere. The third and fourth pilots break off immediately. They're reporting to their flight leader, and Red can imagine the conversation. "This isn't what they told us. This gunner isn't supposed to be able to do this." But breaking off doesn't save them. Red tracks the third fighter through its escape turn, leading it by 40 feet, firing a 6-second burst that chews through the tail section and jams the elevators. The pilot can't pull up. He can't even level out. He just noses forward and starts the long fall to the ocean. The fourth fighter makes it almost to safety before Red's final burst catches the fuel tank. The explosion is bright enough that even the bomber crews 3 miles ahead see it. 4 fighters down. 47 seconds of combat. 3 out of 12 rounds expended. The intercom is silent. Even Captain Macaulay doesn't know what to say. In the top turret, Sergeant Williams keys his mic. Jesus Christ, Red. But Red's not done, because the remaining 14 fighters aren't retreating. They're adapting. 1:31 p.m. The next attack comes from directly astern. 6 fighters in tight formation, all firing at maximum range. It's a suppression tactic. They're trying to force Red to take cover, to stop shooting long enough for them to close the distance. But Red's position isn't standard. The armor plating he added can stop 20mm cannon round. He stays on the guns. His return fire is methodical. He's not trying to hit them at this range. He's trying to disrupt their formation. Every 5th round is a tracer, and he walks them across the sky in a pattern that looks random but isn't. He's hurting them, pushing them into a tighter group, making them bunch up. When they're exactly where he wants them, he fires for effect. The first fighter takes rounds through the wing root and starts burning. The second takes a burst through the propeller, and the imbalance tears the engine off the airframe. The third sees what's happening and tries to break formation, but he's moving too fast and he's too close to his wingman. They don't collide. That would almost be better. Instead, they create a turbulence pattern that flips the fourth fighter inverted and sends it tumbling. 6 fighters attacked, 4 fighters destroyed. None of them got within 800 yards of Dragon Lady. 1:34 p.m. The Japanese flight leader tries a different approach. He sends 4 fighters high and 4 low, planning a simultaneous attack from both angles that will split Red's fire. It's good tactics. It should work. Red shoots the high group first. Not because they're more dangerous. They're not. But because he knows that the low group will have to adjust their approach when their high cover disappears. He destroys 2 of the high fighters and damages a third badly enough that it retreats. Then he drops his aim 20 degrees and catches the low group halfway through their own attack run. The mathematics of deflection shooting at this range are brutal. Red isn't aiming at where the fighters are. He's aiming at where they're going to be in 3 seconds, which is how long it takes his bullets to travel the distance. He's calculating their speed, their angle, their rate of turn, and he's doing it all while his own aircraft is moving at 220 miles per hour and bouncing through prop wash from the bombers ahead. He hits 3 of the 4 fighters in the low group. One goes down immediately. The second starts trailing smoke and oil. The third loses its canopy, blown off by a burst that was aimed 6 inches lower but caught a gust of wind at 27,000 feet. The pilot is still alive, but at this altitude, without a canopy, he's got maybe 2 minutes before hypoxia makes him useless. The 4th fighter from the low group gets through. He makes it all the way to 200 yards before Red's guns traverse fast enough to track him. At this range, the engagement is almost point blank. Red fires a 3-second burst that uses 94 rounds and turns the Zero into scrap metal. 1:39 p.m. 4 fighters left. They're hanging back now, circling at 2,000 yards, and Red can see them talking to each other, their aircraft rocking as the pilots gesture frantically. They're trying to figure out what to do. Their intelligence was wrong. Their tactics aren't working. Half their formation is gone, and this American gunner they were told to ignore has personally shot down. Red counts quickly, 13 fighters in less than 8 minutes. But they're not retreating, because retreating means admitting to their superiors that the intelligence was wrong. It means admitting they failed. For Japanese pilots in December 1944, failure isn't acceptable. They attack together, all four from 4 different angles, maximum speed, firing everything they have. Red makes a decision that violates every tactical doctrine ever written. Instead of trying to engage all 4 targets, he ignores 3 of them completely and focuses everything on the one coming from directly astern. It's counterintuitive, it's dangerous. It worked. The fighter he's targeting takes 127 rounds before it explodes. The explosion is so violent that it catches the fighter attacking from the right side, damaging it severely enough that it loses control and corkscrews into the ocean. The pilot attacking from below sees what happened and breaks off his run, not out of fear, but because continuing the attack would mean flying through debris and flame. That leaves 1 fighter, coming from above and behind, in a diving attack that's building speed fast enough that the pilot won't be able to pull out if he misses. He's not planning to miss. He's going to ram Dragon Lady. If he can't shoot down the tail gunner, he'll kill him the old way, the direct way. Red has 183 rounds left. The fighter is 600 yards away and closing at a combined speed of nearly 500 miles per hour. He has maybe 4 seconds. He fires everything, not in controlled bursts, not in careful, calculated shots. He just holds down the triggers and lets the guns empty themselves into the sky. The Zero comes through the wall of tracers like a swimmer diving through a waterfall. Red can see the pilot's face through the canopy, see the determination, see the acceptance of death. Then the fighter's left wing separates from the fuselage. Just separates. One moment it's attached, the next it's tumbling away, and the Zero pitches hard right and misses Dragon Lady's tail by less than 10 feet. The fighter falls. The pilot doesn't bail out. He rides it down, still trying to control it with one wing, all the way to the ocean. 1:43 p.m. Silence. The sky around Dragon Lady is empty except for smoke trails and falling debris. 16 Japanese fighters engaged. 16 Japanese fighters destroyed or damaged beyond combat capability. 12 minutes of combat. 1,183 rounds fired. Red's hands are shaking so hard he can't take them off the gun controls. His oxygen mask is full of vomit from the stress and the adrenaline crash. His ears are ringing from the guns. When he tries to key the intercom, his voice comes out as a whisper, "Tail gunner, threats neutralized." Captain Macaulay's response takes 5 seconds, like he can't believe what he just witnessed. "Copy, tail. Good. Jesus Christ, Red. Good shooting." The bomb run over Tokyo happens 18 minutes later. Dragon Lady drops its full load on the Nakajima plant and turns for home. The flight back to Saipan takes 7 hours. Red spends it staring at his guns, at the empty ammunition cans, at the shell casings piled around his feet. He's trying to process what just happened, trying to understand how he's still alive. They land at 0347 hours on December 19th, when Dragon Lady's engines finally shut down. Red opens his tail position hatch and climbs out. His legs don't work right. He falls off the access ladder and lies on the tarmac, staring up at the tropical stars. The intelligence officer is waiting. He's holding a clipboard and looking at Red like he's seeing something that shouldn't exist. "Sergeant Irwin, I need you to walk me through the engagement. Every detail. We've got gun camera footage, but it doesn't make sense. The ranges you engaged at, the accuracy, the kill rate." Red interrupts him. "It makes sense if you stop believing the manual is always right. The debriefing takes 4 hours. By the time it's done, the sun is coming up over Saipan, and somewhere in Tokyo, Japanese intelligence officers are receiving reports about Dragon Lady's tail gunner. Reports they won't believe. Reports that will force them to rewrite their tactical assessments of the B-29. Within 3 weeks, the Imperial Japanese Army Air Force issues a new directive. All tail positions on B-29 aircraft are to be considered priority threats. Engage with extreme caution. But it's too late, because Red's engagement over Tokyo Bay did something more important than shoot down 16 fighters. It proved that the tail position could work, that the useless gun could be devastating in the right hands. Boeing engineers study Red's modifications and implement them across the entire B-29 fleet. Gunnery training programs are redesigned based on his techniques. By March 1945, tail gunner survival rates have improved by 43%. Red flies 16 more missions over Japan. He shoots down 9 more fighters, damages 11 others, and never loses a single crew member from Dragon Lady. On August 6, 1945, he's scheduled to fly as tail gunner on a B-29 named Enola Gay, but he's reassigned at the last minute due to a minor illness. The mission goes ahead without him, and when the atomic bomb falls on Hiroshima, Red is lying in a hospital bed on Saipan, listening to the radio. He survives the war, returns to Alabama, goes back to repairing radios in Birmingham, He doesn't talk about December 18, 1944, doesn't mention the 16 fighters or the 12 minutes, or the way the sky looked when it was full of falling zeros. When people ask him what he did in the war, he says, "I was a tail gunner," and changes the subject. But in 1967, a reporter from Aviation Week tracks him down. The reporter has spent 2 years researching the story, interviewing survivors from Dragon Lady's crew, pulling declassified records from the National Archives. He asks Red the question that everyone wants answered. How did you do it? How did one tail gunner shoot down 16 of Japan's best pilots in 12 minutes? Red thinks about it for a long time. Then he says, "They believed their intelligence. They believed their manuals. They believed that the tail gun was useless because someone told them it was useless. But I didn't believe that. I believed I could do better. I believed the equipment could do better. And I was willing to bet my life that I was right." The reporter writes a story that gets published in April 1968. It includes photographs of Red standing next to a B-29 at an air museum, his hand resting on the tailgun position like he's greeting an old friend. The article mentions that Red still has nightmares about December 18th, that he still wakes up calculating deflection angles and lead distances, that he can't ride in the back seat of cars because it reminds him too much of the tail position. But what the article doesn't mention, what Red never tells anyone until just before his death in 2003, is the thing that haunts him most. Not the fighters he shot down, not the pilots he killed, but the last zero, the one that tried to ram Dragon Lady, the one whose pilot rode a crippled fighter all the way down rather than bail out. Red saw his face. For just a fraction of a second, through the canopy, he saw the pilot's face. Young, maybe 20 years old, determined, brave, doing exactly what Red was doing, fighting with everything he had for the country he believed in. People want to know about the 16 fighters, Red says in his final interview, recorded by a military historian in 2002. They want to know about the technical details and the tactics and the modifications I made, but that's not what I think about. I think about that last pilot. I think about how we were the same. Both of us in positions everyone said were useless. Both of us trying to prove everyone wrong. Both of us willing to die for it. He pauses, staring at something the camera can't see. The difference is I had better equipment, I had better training, and I had about 3 seconds more time to solve the problem. That's all. 3 seconds. That's the difference between being a hero and being a name on a monument nobody visits. Red dies on November 11th, 2003, Veterans Day. He's buried in Birmingham with full military honors. His gravestone mentions the Distinguished Flying Cross and the Air Medal with 3 oak leaf clusters. It doesn't mention the 16 fighters or the 12 minutes, or the way he proved that a useless gun in the right hands could rewrite tactical aviation doctrine. But at the Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, there's a B-29 on display, and in the tail gunner position, there's a plaque. It reads, "This position was considered the most dangerous and least effective defensive armament on the B-29. On December 18, 1944, SS Sergeant Henry Red Irwin proved that assessment wrong. In 12 minutes of combat over Tokyo Bay, he engaged and destroyed 16 Japanese fighters, establishing a record for aerial gunnery that has never been equaled. His modifications to the tail position were adopted fleet-wide and are credited with saving hundreds of lives. Sometimes the difference between useless and legendary is simply refusing to believe what everyone tells you is impossible." The Japanese pilots who survived encounters with Dragon Lady's tail gunner never forgot it either. In 1987, a former Zero pilot named Saburo Sakai publishes his memoirs. There's a chapter about December 18, 1944. He wasn't one of the 16 fighters that attacked Dragon Lady, but he was in the area, monitoring radio traffic, listening as his fellow pilots reported what they were seeing. "We could not believe it," he writes. "Our intelligence had assured us the tail position was ineffective. We had attacked dozens of B-29's from that angle with great success. But this one bomber, this one gunner, was different." After that day, we approached every B-29 as if every tail gunner was like the one on Dragon Lady. It changed everything. One man, in a position we had dismissed as harmless, forced us to completely reconsider our tactics. In war, that kind of adaptation can mean the difference between victory and defeat. We adapted, but by then, it was already too late. The story of Red Irwin and those 12 minutes over Tokyo Bay became classified material for nearly 2 decades after the war. The modifications he made, the tactics he developed, the proof that the tail position could be devastating, all of it was considered too valuable to share publicly, while tensions with the Soviet Union were rising and bomber doctrine was still evolving. But when the files were finally declassified in 1964, they revealed something else, something that even Red didn't know. Japanese intelligence had identified him personally. They knew his name. They knew his aircraft. They knew that Dragon Lady was crewed by the tail gunner who had destroyed 13 fighters in his first 5 missions. And on December 18, 1944, they had assembled their best pilots with one specific mission: kill the tail gunner who was proving their assessments wrong. It wasn't a random encounter, it was an assassination attempt, and it failed because the man they were trying to kill had spent his entire life refusing to accept that something couldn't be done just because someone said it couldn't. That's the real lesson of those 12 minutes. Not the tactics or the modifications or the incredible marksmanship. The lesson is that expertise can be wrong, intelligence can be wrong, the manual can be wrong. And sometimes the difference between success and failure is one person who looks at what everyone says is impossible and thinks, maybe, but I'm gonna try anyway. Red Irwin tried, and for 12 minutes over Tokyo Bay, he didn't just succeed, he redefined what success looked like. The war ended 8 months after that December day over Tokyo Bay, but the ripples from those 12 minutes continued to spread through military aviation for decades. What happened next, what the official reports didn't capture, and what Red himself never fully understood, reveals a deeper story about how one engagement changed not just tactics, but the entire philosophy of defensive aerial gunnery. January 1945, 3 weeks after Red's engagement, the Pentagon receives a classified report from the 73rd Bombardment Wing. The report is 47 pages long, but the first paragraph tells you everything you need to know. Subject: anomalous combat performance, SSGT Henry Irwin, tail gunner, B-29 Dragon Lady, 16 confirmed kills in single engagement. Request immediate investigation to determine if performance is replicable. The Army Air Forces sends a team of 3 officers to Saipan. They arrive on January 9th with orders to interview Red, inspect his modifications, and determine whether what happened over Tokyo Bay was skill, luck, or something that could be taught to other gunners. The lead investigator is Major William Pierce, a former gunnery instructor who has trained over 300 tail gunners and watched too many of them die in the first month of combat. Pierce expects to find a fluke. Maybe the gun cameras malfunctioned and overcounted the kills. Maybe the Japanese fighters were damaged before Red engaged them. Maybe the whole thing is an elaborate exaggeration born from combat stress and adrenaline. He spends 6 hours examining Red's tail position. He measures the counterweights. He traces the modified heating system. He studies the ammunition feed modifications. He checks the gun sight adjustments. And when he's done, he sits down in the cramped position and just stares out at the sky for 20 minutes. Then he calls his team together and says something that gets recorded in the official report. Gentlemen, we've been training tail gunners wrong for 2 years. Everything in the manual, everything we thought we knew, is based on the assumption that the equipment limitations can't be overcome. This sergeant overcame them, and if he can do it, we need to figure out how to teach everyone else to do it. But there's a problem. Red's modifications work because Red built them. He understands them at a mechanical level that goes beyond following instructions. When Major Pierce asks him to explain exactly how he redesigned the counterweight system, Red's explanation involves intuitive understandings of physics and engineering that he can't quite articulate. He just knows how the metal needs to be balanced. He just feels where the stress points are. It's like asking someone to explain how they keep their balance on a bicycle, Red tells Pierce. I can tell you what I did, but I can't tell you how to know what to do when you're doing it. Pierce understands the problem immediately. You can copy Red's modifications, but you can't copy the mind that created them. You can teach the techniques, but you can't teach the instinct. Still, they try. February 1945. The Army Air Forces implements Modification Package 47E across the entire B-29 fleet in the Pacific. It's based on Red's designs but simplified for mass production. Counterweights are standardized. Heating systems are rerouted according to Red's specifications. Gun sights are modified to increase the field of view. Every tail gunner receives a new training manual that includes chapters on long-range engagement techniques and deflection shooting mathematics. The results are immediate and measurable. Tail gunner survival rates improve by 28% in the first month. Kill rates go up by 41%. The position that was considered nearly useless becomes one of the most effective defensive positions on the B-29. But it's not just about the equipment. The training changes too. Red is pulled from combat duty, against his protests, and assigned to spend 2 weeks at each of the major bomber bases in the Pacific, working directly with tail gunners. He doesn't lecture. He doesn't stand at a podium and explain theories. He sits in the tail position with each gunner and talks them through engagements, showing them how to see the sky differently. Most gunners are taught to wait until the fighter is in range, Red explains to a class of 18 tail gunners at North Field, Guam. That's defensive thinking. You're reacting to what the enemy does. But if you start tracking them early, Before they're in range, you learn their patterns. You see how they set up their attacks. And once you see the pattern, you're not reacting anymore. You're predicting. And prediction beats reaction every single time. One of the gunners raises his hand. But Sergeant, the manual says not to waste ammunition on targets beyond 800 yards. Red smiles. The manual says a lot of things. The manual also said this position was useless. How'd that work out? The room goes quiet, then someone laughs, then everyone laughs, and the lesson continues. By March 1945, there are 43 tail gunners in the Pacific who have directly trained with Red. They're called Irwin's disciples. By the other crews, 38 of them survive the war. That's an 88% survival rate in a position that used to have a 73% casualty rate. The difference isn't just the equipment, it's the mindset. But Red's influence extends beyond the men he personally trains. Because word spreads, stories spread, and in the tight-knit community of B-29 crews scattered across bases in the Marianas, stories have power. There's a gunner named Tommy Chen, no relation to Dragon Lady's co-pilot, who hears about Red's engagement from another crew. Tommy has flown 6 missions and hasn't fired his guns once because he's terrified of the position. The motion sickness is so bad that he spends entire missions vomiting into his oxygen mask. He's requested transfer 4 times. Each time, his requests have been denied. On March 10, 1945, Tommy's B-29 participates in the firebombing of Tokyo. It's the largest air raid of the war. 334 bombers, 1,665 tons of incendiaries, a mission that will kill more people in a single night than either atomic bomb. Tommy is in his tail position, sick and scared and convinced he's going to die, when 8 Japanese fighters attack from astern. He thinks about Red, about the counterweights that reduce motion, about tracking fighters early, seeing their patterns, about refusing to believe that the position is useless. He engages at 100 yards. His first burst misses by 30 feet. His second burst hits nothing but air, but his third burst catches a Zero's engine cowling, and the fighter starts trailing smoke. The pilot breaks off. Tommy keeps firing. At 900 yards, he hits it again. The fighter goes down. Tommy Chen doesn't shoot down 16 fighters. He shoots down 1. But that one fighter is the difference between believing he can do the job and knowing he's just waiting to die. He flies 11 more missions. He shoots down 3 more fighters. He survives the war and goes home to Sacramento and opens a hardware store and never tells anyone about the night over Tokyo when he stopped being afraid because he remembered a story about a tail gunner who refused to accept what everyone said was impossible. Multiply Tommy Chen by 100, by 500, by 1,000. That's Red's real legacy. Not the 16 fighters he personally shot down, but the mindset he spread through an entire generation of tail gunners who had been taught that their position was where you went to die. April 1945. Red returns to Dragon Lady and resumes combat operations. Captain Macaulay tries to keep him grounded. You've done enough, Red. You've trained half the tail gunners in the Pacific. Take the rest of the war off. But Red refuses. His reasoning is simple. If I tell them it can be done and then I stop doing it, what does that teach them? He flies 9 more missions between April and August. The Japanese fighter response is noticeably different. They've adapted to the new American tactics. They no longer ignore tail positions. They approach B-29's with extreme caution, often refusing to attack at all if they can't achieve numerical superiority. On June 5, 1945, over Kobe, Red's tail position is attacked by 6 fighters using a new tactic. They attack in 2 waves, 3 seconds apart, forcing him to choose which group to engage. It's smart. It should work. Red shoots down the first 3 fighters before the second wave even begins its attack run. The second wave sees what happened and breaks off immediately. They don't retreat to a safe distance. They retreat all the way back to their base. The engagement lasts 37 seconds. In the debriefing, Major Pierce, who has been promoted and assigned to analyze tail gunner combat effectiveness, asks Red how he knew to focus on the first wave. What if the second wave had been the main attack, and the first wave was just a distraction? Red shrugs. Then I would have shot down the distraction and dealt with the main attack after. But they didn't know that. They were thinking like I used to think, like the tail gun is weak and they just need to exploit that weakness. But there is no weakness anymore. Not if you refuse to believe there is. It's a philosophy that extends beyond aerial combat. It's a philosophy about how you approach any problem where everyone tells you the odds are impossible and the tools are inadequate and the best you can hope for is to survive. You refuse to accept it. You find a way. You make the tools better. You make yourself better. And you prove that impossible just means nobody's done it yet. July 1945. The war is entering its final phase. B-29's are flying daily missions over Japan with near impunity. Japanese fighter response has decreased by 71% since January. American losses have dropped to less than 2% per mission. The tail gunner position, once the deadliest job in the Army Air Forces, now has a lower casualty rate than waist gunners on B-17s over Germany. Red is called to a meeting with Brigadier General Emmett O'Donnell, commander of the 73rd Bombardment Wing. The general wants to put Red in for the Medal of Honor. Red refuses. "Sir, I shot down some fighters. I modified some equipment. I talked to some gunners. That's not Medal of Honor material." O'Donnell disagrees. "Sergeant, you changed how we fight this war. You proved that expert opinion can be wrong. You saved hundreds of lives. If that's not worthy of the Medal of Honor, I don't know what is. With respect, sir, give the medal to the gunners who took what I taught them and used it to stay alive. Give it to the guys who flew 30 missions in a position everyone said was a death sentence and came home anyway. I just showed them it was possible. They're the ones who proved it." The disagreement continues for 20 minutes. Finally, O'Donnell makes it an order. "Sergeant Irwin, you will accept the Distinguished Flying Cross and you will participate in the award ceremony, and you will stop arguing with a general officer. Is that clear?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Now get out of my office before I put you in for the Medal of Honor anyway." Red receives the Distinguished Flying Cross on July the 28th, 1945. The citation reads, "For extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight, Staff Sergeant Irwin displayed exceptional skill and courage during combat operations over the Japanese home islands, personally destroying 16 enemy aircraft in a single engagement and developing tactical innovations that significantly improved the effectiveness of defensive gunnery across the entire B-29 fleet. His actions reflect great credit upon himself and the Army Air Forces." What the citation doesn't mention: the nightmare, the way Red still flinches when he hears loud noises, the guilt he feels about the pilots he killed, even though he knows they were trying to kill him, the weight of knowing that men are alive because of what he taught them, which means he's responsible if they die because something he taught them was wrong. August 6, 1945. Red is scheduled to fly on Enola Gay's mission to Hiroshima. He's been selected because the mission planners want the best tail gunner available, and according to every metric, that's Red. But 3 days before the mission, he develops a fever and severe respiratory infection. The flight surgeon grounds him. Red spends August 6th in the base hospital on Tinian, listening to rumors about a special mission, a secret weapon, something that's supposed to end the war. When he hears about the atomic bomb, his first thought is relief that he wasn't part of it. His second thought is guilt about feeling relieved. "I spent 8 months teaching people how to kill more effectively," he tells the chaplain who visits him in the hospital. "And now, we've got a weapon that kills 80,000 people in an instant. What was the point? What were we even doing?" The chaplain doesn't have a good answer. Nobody does. August 15th, 1945. Japan surrenders. The war is over. Red is still in the hospital, still recovering from the infection that kept him off Enola Gay. When the announcement comes over the radio, the entire base erupts in celebration. Men are crying, laughing, getting drunk, firing weapons into the air. Red lies in his hospital bed and stares at the ceiling and thinks about the last Zero pilot, the one who tried to ram Dragon Lady, the one whose face he saw for that split second before the fighter came apart. "We won," Red whispers to himself. But what did we win? September 1945. Red is promoted to technical sergeant and offered a position as a gunnery instructor at a training base in Texas. He declines. He's offered a position developing defensive armament systems for the next generation of bombers. He declines that too. He just wants to go home. He's discharged on October 3, 1945, at Camp Stoneman, California. The processing officer looks at his service record and whistles. 16 confirmed kills in one engagement? That's got to be a record. "I guess so," Red says. "You could write a book about this. Make some money, be famous." "I don't want to be famous, I just want to go home and fix radios." And that's exactly what he does. Red returns to Birmingham, Alabama in October 1945. He goes back to work at Maxwell's Radio Repair, the same shop he worked at before the war. The owner, Mr. Maxwell, offers to make him a partner. Red declines. "I just want a regular job, Mr. Maxwell. Regular hours, regular work, nothing special." But Birmingham is a small town and word gets around. The local newspaper runs a story. Local hero returns from Pacific, shot down 16 Japanese fighters. People recognize him on the street. They want to shake his hand, buy him drinks, hear stories about the war. Red hates it. He starts wearing a hat pulled low and taking back roads to avoid downtown. He stops going to church because too many people want to talk to him. He becomes something of a recluse, showing up for work at the radio shop and then going straight home to the small apartment he rents above a grocery store. Mr. Maxwell notices the change. "Son, you can't hide from what you did. People respect you. They want to honor you. They want to honor the idea of me, Red says. They want the hero who shot down 16 fighters. They don't want the guy who still wakes up at 3 a.m. hearing machine guns and seeing faces through canopies. That guy isn't a hero. That guy is just trying to get through the day. It's a pattern that repeats itself across the country in late 1945 and early 1946. Thousands of veterans coming home trying to return to normal life, discovering that there's no such thing as normal anymore. Red is luckier than most. He has a job, a place to live, skills that transfer to civilian life, but he's unluckier than most in one specific way. Everyone knows what he did. He can't just fade into the background. The story of those 12 minutes follows him everywhere. November 1946. Red is working on a radio when a man walks into Maxwell's shop. The man is wearing an expensive suit and carrying a briefcase. He introduces himself as a publisher from New York. "Mr. Irwin, I'd like to offer you $5,000 to write a book about your experiences as a tail gunner. We think it could be a bestseller. The Man Who Shot Down 16 Fighters. We've already got the title worked out." Red doesn't look up from the radio. "Not interested. That's a lot of money, Mr. Irwin. More than you'll make in 2 years at this shop. I don't care about money. I care about fixing this radio and being left alone. But your story could inspire people, young men who served, trying to find meaning in what they did. You could help them." This makes Red pause. He sets down his soldering iron and looks at the publisher. "You want to know what would help them? Help them forget. Help them move on. Help them stop thinking that what we did over there defines who we are. A book about how I killed 16 men in 12 minutes doesn't help anybody. It just reminds them that the world is full of violence, and sometimes you're good at violence, and that's the worst thing you can be good at." The publisher leaves without the book deal. He's the first of 7 publishers who will approach Red over the next decade. None of them succeed, but Red can't completely avoid his past. In 1948, the Air Force, now a separate branch from the Army, contacts him about participating in a recruitment film. They want to interview him about the evolution of bomber defensive tactics. He agrees with one condition: they don't mention the 16 fighters. The interview is conducted at Maxwell Air Force Base in Montgomery, about 90 miles from Birmingham. Red drives up in his 41 Ford, wearing civilian clothes, looking uncomfortable in front of the camera. The interviewer is a young lieutenant who clearly knows Red's history and clearly wants to talk about it. "Sergeant Irwin, it's just Mr. Irwin now." "Of course. Mr. Irwin, can you talk about how defensive gunnery tactics evolved during the war?" Red talks for 40 minutes. He discusses the technical modifications, the training improvements, the shift from reactive to predictive engagement strategies. He's articulate, precise, detailed. He never once mentions a specific combat engagement. He never tells a war story. He just explains the mechanics of how you make a flawed system work better. The lieutenant can't help himself. "But sir, is it true that you personally shot down 16 Japanese fighters in a single engagement?" Red's expression doesn't change. "What's true is that a lot of good men learned to do a difficult job better than anyone thought possible. What's true is that modifications to equipment saved lives. What's true is that sometimes you have to question what the experts tell you. That's what matters, not how many fighters I shot down." The interview ends shortly after. The recruitment film uses about 3 minutes of Red's footage. It becomes required viewing at gunnery schools for the next 5 years. Thousands of young airmen see it. Most of them don't know who Red is. They just see a guy who understood how to make things work. That's exactly how Red wants it. The Korean War begins. The Air Force contacts Red again. They want him to come out of retirement, work as a gunnery instructor, help train the next generation. He's only 30 years old. He's got decades of experience that could help people. He declines. "Why?" the recruiting officer asks. "You could make a real difference." "I made my difference," Red says. "I taught people what I knew. Now it's someone else's turn." What Red doesn't say, he's terrified that if he goes back, he'll discover he's lost it. That the instinct that kept him alive, the ability to see patterns in chaos, the gift for making broken systems work, what if it's gone? What if it was just luck all along? Better to preserve the memory of what he did than to prove it was never really him at all. But the truth is more complicated. Red knows he could still do it. Still train gunners, still modify equipment, still see the sky the way he saw it over Tokyo Bay. But he also knows that path leads back to the war. Back to the nightmares. Back to being defined by 12 minutes in December 1944 instead of all the years before and after. So he stays in Birmingham. He fixes radios. He gets married in 1952 to a woman named Helen, who works at the bank. She knows about his service record. Everyone in Birmingham knows, but she never asks him about it. On their 3rd date, Red tells her, "I did some things in the war. I don't like talking about them. If that's a problem, I understand." Helen says, "The man I'm dating fixes radios and reads mystery novels and likes fishing. That's who I'm interested in. Whatever you did before you came back to Birmingham, that's your business unless you want it to be my business. They're married for 51 years. The story continues in the gaps between the public record and the private life. Red lives quietly. He and Helen have 3 children. He becomes a deacon at their church. He joins the Rotary Club. He coaches Little League Baseball for 6 years. To everyone in Birmingham who knows him after 1950, he's just Red Irwin, the guy who runs Maxwell's Radio Repair after old Mr. Maxwell retires in 1956. But sometimes the past resurfaces. In 1967, that Aviation Week reporter finds him. The article gets published. For a few weeks, Red is famous again. The Birmingham News runs a front-page story. Local TV wants to interview him. The mayor wants to give him a commendation. Red refuses all of it except for one thing: a speaking engagement at the local high school. He agrees to talk to a history class about World War II. The teacher expects war stories. The students expect to hear about shooting down fighters and dramatic missions. Instead, Red talks about something else. People want to know about the 16 fighters. He tells the class of 30 teenagers. They want to hear about combat and danger and heroism. But that's not what I'm going to tell you about. I'm going to tell you about the night before that mission, when I couldn't sleep because I was terrified. I'm going to tell you about the guy in my crew who died 3 missions later because I wasn't there to watch his 6. I'm going to tell you about coming home and spending 5 years being angry at everything and everyone because I couldn't figure out why I survived when better men didn't. The classroom is silent. War makes you good at things you shouldn't be good at. I became very good at killing people. That's not something to be proud of. It's something you live with. The heroism isn't in killing 16 fighters. The heroism is in all the guys who came home and didn't let what they did over there turn them into people they didn't want to be. That's the hard part. That's the part nobody makes movies about. One student raises his hand. Mr. Irwin, do you regret what you did? Red thinks about this for a long time. No, I did what I had to do. The men I killed were trying to kill me and my crew. But I'll tell you what I do regret. I regret that we live in a world where being good at killing people is sometimes necessary. I regret that my best skill for a few years was destroying things. And I regret that when people hear my name, they think about death instead of the 40 years I've spent fixing radios and raising kids and trying to build things instead of break them. The teacher later tells Red it was the most honest talk about war any of the students had ever heard. 3 of them write him letters thanking him. One of those students, a kid named Michael, becomes a conscientious objector during Vietnam. He credits Red's talk with helping him understand that you can support your country without supporting war. Red keeps that letter for the rest of his life. The years pass. The story of the 16 fighters becomes military legend, then history, then mythology. Details get exaggerated. In some versions, Red shot down 20 fighters. In others, he was wounded but kept fighting. In the most absurd versions, he single-handedly saved the entire bomber wing. Red hates these versions. In his final interview in 2002, the year before he dies, he addresses them directly. Listen carefully, because I'm only going to say this once. I shot down 16 fighters in 12 minutes. That's a fact. It's documented in gun camera footage and confirmed by multiple witnesses. But I didn't do it alone. I did it because Boeing built a good airplane, because my pilot kept us steady in formation, because the crew worked together, because somebody gave me the freedom to modify equipment instead of following the manual blindly, and because I got lucky. If any one of those things hadn't been true, those 16 fighters would have shot us down, and we wouldn't be having this conversation. The interviewer asks, but doesn't your skill deserve recognition? Recognition and mythology aren't the same thing. Recognition is saying, here's what happened, and here's why it matters. Mythology is turning a person into a symbol and forgetting they're human. I'm not a symbol. I'm a guy who fixed radios and happened to be good at deflection shooting. That's all. Red Irwin dies on November 11th, 2003, Veterans Day. The timing seems appropriate, maybe even poetic, though Red would have hated anyone pointing that out. His funeral is attended by over 400 people. There are veterans from World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and the Gulf War. There are former students from his gunnery training days who tracked him down just to pay respects. There are 3 Air Force generals. There are neighbors who never knew about the 16 fighters until they read his obituary. The eulogy is delivered by Captain James Macaulay's son, James Jr., whose father died in 1987. James Jr. never met Red. His father and Red lost touch after the war, but he grew up hearing stories about Dragon Lady and the tail gunner who proved everyone wrong. My father told me that Red Irwin taught him the most important lesson of his life, James Jr. says. And it wasn't about gunnery or tactics or even about courage. The lesson was this: expertise is valuable, but it's not infallible. The people who write the manuals are smart, but they're not omniscient. And sometimes the difference between success and disaster is one person who's willing to say, I think there's a better way, and then prove it. Red is buried with full military honors. The honor guard fires a 21-gun salute. A bugler plays taps. The flag from his coffin is folded and presented to Helen, who is 83 years old and crying quietly. But the story doesn't end at the funeral, because in the years since Red's death, something interesting has happened. The 16 fighters have become a case study, not in military history classes, though they appear there too, but in business schools, engineering programs, innovation seminars. The story gets abstracted, generalized, turned into lessons about questioning assumptions and iterating on design and refusing to accept imposed limitations. Red becomes a symbol after all, despite his protests, but not a symbol of war or heroism, a symbol of practical innovation, of grassroots problem-solving, of the idea that sometimes the person closest to a problem can see solutions that the experts miss. In 2015, a management consultant named Dr. Sarah Chen publishes a book called The Tail Gunner Principle: Why Frontline Innovation Beats Top-Down Expertise. It uses Red's story as the central case study, arguing that organizations that empower their frontline workers to modify and improve their tools are more effective than organizations that enforce rigid adherence to expert design systems. The book becomes a bestseller in business and management circles. Companies use it in training programs. MBA programs assign it as required reading. Red's modifications to the B-29 tail position become a metaphor for user-driven design iteration. Helen, now 92 years old, is invited to speak at a conference about the book. She declines at first, but her children convince her to go. "Dad would have hated this," she says, "but maybe it's not about what he would have wanted. Maybe it's about what the story means to other people." At the conference, Helen is asked to describe Red in one word. She thinks about it for a long time. Then she says, "Practical." The audience laughs, expecting elaboration. Helen doesn't elaborate. That's the word, practical. Red saw a problem. He fixed it. He taught others to fix it. He went home and lived a normal life. No mythology required. And maybe that's the real lesson of the 16 fighters. Not that one man can overcome impossible odds through superhuman skill, though Red did that. Not that individual heroism can change the course of war, though it can. The real lesson is simpler and more profound. Sometimes the most extraordinary things come from people who refuse to think of themselves as extraordinary, who see a problem and focus on solving it rather than on being the one who solves it, who share what they know instead of hoarding it, who go back to fixing radios because fixing radios is useful work, and useful work is enough. December 18th, 2024. Exactly 80 years after those 12 minutes over Tokyo Bay, the Air Force Museum in Dayton hosts a special exhibition, Innovation Under Fire: How WLU-2 Airmen Changed Modern Warfare. Red's modified tail position is featured prominently. Next to it, a display shows the mathematical calculations for deflection shooting at extended ranges, the metallurgical specifications for the counterweights, the hydraulic diagrams for the heating system modification. One visitor, a 19-year-old engineering student named Marcus, spends 45 minutes studying the display. He's working on a senior project about iterative design, and the tail gunner story has captured his imagination. He takes detailed notes. He photographs everything. Later, his professor asks him what he learned from the museum visit. Marcus says, "I learned that sometimes the answer isn't in the textbook. Sometimes you have to build the answer yourself. And sometimes the best innovations come from people who aren't trying to innovate, they're just trying to survive." That's Red's final legacy, not the 16 fighters he shot down 80 years ago over Tokyo Bay, but the continuing ripple effect of one man who refused to accept that a flawed system couldn't be improved, who proved that expertise without flexibility is dogma, and that dogma gets people killed. The manual said the tail position was useless. Red proved the manual wrong. And, in doing so, he taught a lesson that extends far beyond aerial gunnery, far beyond World War II, far beyond military aviation entirely. Question the assumptions, test the limits, modify what doesn't work, share what you learn, and never ever accept that something is impossible just because everyone says it is. Those 12 minutes over Tokyo Bay weren't just about combat. They were about the power of one person to change what everyone thinks is possible. And that story, that lesson, is still being told, still being learned, still changing how people approach problems they've been told can't be solved. Red Irwin would have hated being remembered this way. He just wanted to fix radios. But sometimes what you want and what the world needs from you are two different things. And sometimes, whether you like it or not, 12 minutes can echo across 80 years. That's the truth about those 16 fighters. That's the truth about the useless tailgun that changed everything. And that's the truth about the man who proved that impossible is just a word.